What is up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com. I'm Jacob Turner. Joining me, as he always does, our very own publisher, Andrew Jones. And AJ, we're here after a week hiatus back on the UNC football show. Carolina obviously coming off a bye week, so we decided to take a bye week with this show as well. I mean, a lot of stuff going on kind of outside of football for North Carolina, obviously. Dealing with the, the stuff with Tylee Craft and his funeral was this past weekend. So while Carolina has had a bye week, it definitely hasn't been an off week for them and mentally and emotionally with everything going on over there. So we will talk a little bit about, Tylee a little bit later on, kind of discuss some elements around him. Will it galvanize the team a little bit? Maybe it has the opposite effect, some interesting things to discuss in this show before we preview Virginia later on as well. Noon kickoff in Scott Stadium this weekend. That game will be on the CW network. Carolina currently a 4-point underdog, but they have won 5 of the last 7 in Charlottesville, despite being 27-27 all time on the road against UVA. So South's oldest rivalry is back, AJ, and again, it's going to be a fascinating day. And just for you too, AJ, I mean, fantastic time of the year to go up to Charlottesville, man. It's going to be beautiful on Saturday.
Open air press box. Fully. Like at Duke, they pull the windows up.
Yeah.
And Clemson, they moved to open air press box last year, or within the last few years. Mm-hmm. When I used to cover them a lot when I was at Fox or whenever one of the North Carolina teams would play there, North Carolina, Duke State, whatever, it was closed press box. They opened it up. But Virginia's always been open air.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I covered, going back a ways here, because it's going to be chilly in the morning.
Oh, yeah.
They have little heat lamps. Excuse me. You feel like you're like a burger sitting on a fast food rack with a heat lamp up there, keeping it warm. But when it's really, really cold or really hot out, it's a little more difficult because the fans aren't so great. So Penn State's first football game after all the Sandusky and Joe Pa stuff was at Virginia, and I covered it for Fox.
Oh, wow.
And I remember sitting next to Heather Dinich in that game, and it was 100 degrees out, close to it. And we're in this old enclosed press box. Not enclosed, open air press box, but it's tight squeeze there. When you lean back, you hit a wall, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I remember how much she was sweating. And I said, Heather, as much as you're sweating sitting in this thing, I'm sweating 5 times as much as you right now. It was brutal. I felt like I had to take a shower on the way home. It was so bad. But,
I believe it.
But at the same time, for this time of year, it's great covering a game there. You can smell the grass, and I love the fact that they still play on grass. Mm-hmm. You really can smell the grass.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. That's cool right there.
And a noon game means morning. It'll be a little bit chilly in the morning. And by the end of the second quarter, if you got an extra layer of clothing, you got to take it off because it'll be 75.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's going to be nice.
It's a beautiful stadium. It's a shame that Virginia football doesn't resonate like it used to, because in the 90s and early 2000s, George Welsh had pumped so much enthusiasm in the program because they won. They finally became relevant. That place used to be a hornet's nest. Mm-hmm. I remember, and I've talked to Mack about this, the first game I ever covered was Carolina's loss up there in 1996. It was the Chris Keldorf interception game. Mm-hmm. And Carolina needed Virginia State troopers behind their bench because UVA fans were throwing liquor bottles and stuff at the bench. That's the kind of atmosphere it used to be there. It's going to be a laid back, as my friend Bruce Young would say, Birkenstock crowd on Saturday.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
And there'll be a few of the guys wearing the ties and the shorts or whatever, but it's not going to be the same kind of place it's been because there's a lot of apathy around Virginia football right now. For good reason, I think. And North Carolina is probably not going to resonate a whole lot up there like it used to. It's the South's oldest rivalry, but it doesn't feel like it used to. I remember a couple of Virginia games in Chapel Hill in the 90s where Keenan was a buzz.
Mm-hmm.
Buzz. Mm-hmm. And they were great games. And they mattered. And people didn't like George Wells. Like when he picked up grass off the ground and put it in his mouth. They hated that. Mm-hmm. It's different now. There's not a lot of venom between the two.
Yeah, it is. There's similar kind of, really, you talk about there being a little bit of apathy around Virginia right now. Carolina's kind of in the same boat with how the season's gone so far. I think if this game's in Chapel Hill, we're probably having a very similar conversation of, we're probably not going to be as good of a crowd as you'd maybe expect for this game. Because even me, I've been going to Carolina games for, 15 years. Season tickets are covering it. But I've been to some really good Virginia games. I've been up to Charlottesville a couple of times for some Carolina and sat in the stands for a couple of Carolina UVA games. And I mean, it's been some really fantastic environments in Chapel Hill and in Charlottesville. So yeah, I agree. Not necessarily expecting that this Saturday, but I will say the weather will be elite. So, have some fun with that.
And it's a beautiful stadium. It's a beautiful stadium. Fantastic. The grounds, I won't call it campus because some guy will get all ticked off at me. The grounds are very nice.
Yes.
Driving in will be nice. And it's a gorgeous stadium. If you're thinking about it, you should go because you're gonna be able to walk up and buy a ticket. It's not a bad seat in the house, and it's a good looking stadium. It's be there for when the Cavalier comes out on the horse before the game. It's great. I just wish it mattered. I just wish the place was full. I wish all the ACC venues had full environments. It would make it more fun, but certainly one like this because it used to be that way. It used to be that way.
It definitely did. Yeah. It'll be an interesting one to see what the crowd is like and what the environment's like. But regardless, it's a game that Carolina's going to be looking to go up there and win. And again, it's a game that Carolina desperately needs to go up there and win. And AJ, I want to talk real quickly because obviously coming off the bye week and obviously coming off everything with Tylee Craft and like I mentioned earlier, his funeral being this past weekend and the bye week we've talked about, it came in an exceptional time for North Carolina with everything going on, 4 losses in a row and just the emotional toll that not only that, but in the physical toll that comes along with that, but the emotional toll of dealing with Tylee Craft and everything too. It came at an absolutely perfect time. But from being back in the Keenan Football Center, obviously you weren't there last week because of the bye week. What's the vibe like around the program? Because I think there's 2 different ways you can look at this, AJ, and we were discussing this off camera a little bit. I think there's a part of you that looks at everything that's gone on this year and you're kind of looking at some of the games, the Duke game, maybe the Georgia Tech and be like, okay, a couple things go differently. Carolina can win those games. We're having a little bit of a different conversation right now, but they haven't. So the fact that they've lost 4 in a row and the fact that they're dealing with the emotional, everything that goes along with losing, a brother and a teammate in Tylee Craft, not only the players, but the coaches as well. That can go one way of kind of galvanizing the team on and giving them maybe a little bit more of a purpose, a little bit more pep in their step starting this weekend of saying, hey, let's go out and, try as hard as we can. Not that this team hasn't been, but let's go out there for the rest of the season and win these games for Tylee. It gives you a little bit of a purpose to play with. And maybe this Carolina team could use because of how the season's gone. But on the flip, you look at it and you're kind of sitting here saying, well, this is a lot of distraction. The team has lost 4 in a row. That's hard to deal with. They're not playing great football on the defensive side of the ball right now, especially offensively. They're struggling. They have a lot of things they need to improve on. And does the addition of having to deal with everything that comes along with losing somebody like Tylee, does that mean your mind's elsewhere and it's harder to get up for these games? I think there's 2 different ways you can look at it. But from being in the KFC this week, what are you sensing in terms of the vibe around the program?
I ran to a few players, I won't name them, when I was leaving Monday and then when I was leaving yesterday. We did Mack and the coordinators Monday, we did players Tuesday. I ran to a couple of them like in the elevator I go up to the 3rd floor and walk the concourse where I park. The James Sperling part of the concourse, the great James Sperling, by the way. Legend. Unbelievable. And the topic of Tylee came up each time, and it was 3 players, and they said, all 3 of them said he's in a better place. I'm glad he's not. I'm glad we don't see him struggling anymore. So, I think that it may have been tougher seeing him struggle and go into hospice, knowing what hospice meant, than afterward. Especially now they've got the celebration of life that happened on Sunday. It's sort of a reset. They can restart. That's not weighing on them anymore. So it might be easier moving forward because of how his mother handled it. And they saw that. And it was about celebrating what he was, not about him not being there anymore. And I think that's the approach that the whole program has taken. And it's a very healthy approach, in my personal opinion. But they've had a lot of stuff. I mean, they started fall camp with Randy Clements being rushed to the hospital.
Yeah, it's a good point.
And I'm not going to get into specifics. I don't know everything. And I can just tell you that it was really serious. Mm-hmm. He missed the first 8 or 9 days of fall camp. It was very, very serious. And then we talked to him a few days after he came back. He's like, I'm not going to have any procedures until the spring. Well, then he goes back in. And then he's out and he's back in. Then he missed a game. Then he coached a game from the press. An offensive line coach cannot coach a game from a press box. No. But he did because he couldn't be on the field, on the sideline. And he's been in and out. He's missed some meetings. He's missed some practices. The offensive line needs their guy. He's very well respected in the coaching community as an offensive line coach, and he's kind of been in and out and stuff. And that's been tough for these kids to see. And I cannot emphasize the gruesomeness of Max Johnson's injury.
Oh yeah.
Without saying some things that probably shouldn't be said simply because of his right to privacy, but it was bad. That was not just a broken leg. It took him 2 weeks to come back from Minnesota for a reason. Mm-hmm. And there were multiple surgeries, and the kids know that, and they see him now. And well, Max can't stand. Max can't sit. I mean, he's really going through a tough time right now. So that weighed on them a lot too. And then you're losing these close, and then all of a sudden JMU happens.
Yeah.
Like that's a kick in the head. And they regrouped. They went to Duke and played well. They were ready to go. And then they melt down. And then they're tied with Pitt going in the fourth quarter and they get outscored 10-0. And then they score in the last minute to tie Georgia Tech and boom, 68 yards. Miscommunication, as Jeff Collins put it, on that 68-yard run. So, at some point, you start to believe in Murphy's Law about what can go wrong will go wrong.
Yeah.
So the good timing of an open date for them, A, to deal with Tylee in the aftermath, B, to physically heal, and C, just pull the plug and walk away for a few minutes. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that's the best thing to do and come back fresh and get going again. Maybe that's really good for this team. I think it also helps, to be perfectly honest, that the schedule's not tough the rest of the way. Yeah. And these last 3 games, all 3 were games they could win, was the toughest 3-game stretch of the schedule. That illustrates how weak the schedule is. Although Duke's 6-1?
Yeah.
Georgia Tech's 4-3, but a very competitive 4-3. And Pitt is 6-0. Mm-hmm. Those aren't bad teams. They're all going to bowl. Excuse me. They're all going to. I do have water this time, unlike it.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the schedule sets up perfectly for North Carolina, especially with the bye week coming up again in a couple weeks too. You did a drop on Monday kind of talking about this 2-game sprint that Carolina has coming up. And like we've talked about, 2 very winnable games as well. Let's not get it twisted. I mean, arguably the FSU game coming up next weekend is more winnable than this game. And I don't think there's a massive difference. I think Carolina can go up to UVA and win. I think Carolina can go down to Tallahassee and win. I think the problem is with we were talking about this a little bit off camera, but the issues that we've talked about this a lot on shows for years now, but I think the biggest criticism that's been labeled maybe at this staff throughout the tenure of the Mack Brown 2.0 era has been how it's kind of the same issues every week in every season. We're kind of having to talk about why is the defense underperforming? Why can't they stop the run? Why is the defense giving up these catastrophic plays? Offensively, why is the O-line struggling? Again, Randy Clements and some of that goes along with it. A lot of new faces on there. You can kind of understand maybe why the O-line has had some struggles early on. Why is Carolina not able to, develop a consistent pass rush to go back to defense? Things like that.
Those sacks the last 2 weeks, by the way.
Yeah, that as well. You're having these conversations week in, week out, season in, season out that are the same thing. And I think the question is, and based on what we've seen, there's no evidence to suggest based on what we've seen that all these things or even a few of these things are just miraculously going to be fixed because of a bye week. Now, does it help? Absolutely. Does being able to cut the cord, should that help? Absolutely. Does maybe losing a teammate like Carolina has, does that galvanize the team a little bit more? It can definitely do that and inspire the team going to the rest of the year. It could potentially. The problem is we can talk about how easy the schedule is. We can talk about all these maybe extra motivations that Carolina has. That's all great potentially. The problem is, AJ, is until we see these things fixed, until this defense stop giving up these massive catastrophic plays, until the O-line starts to block a little bit better for Omarion Hampton so he can actually get past the line of scrimmage and do what he does and break tackles and get out in space and make defenders miss, none of this really matters until those issues are fixed. So Will they be fixed going into Virginia? No, I don't think so. Maybe a couple of them are improved, yes. And maybe that's what it takes for Carolina to get over the hump in a couple of these games. Because like you just said, Carolina's lost to some good teams this year for sure. And they haven't been that far away, minus the JMU game, haven't really been that far away. Heck, even the Pitt game being a 10-point loss. I mean, that game was tied going into the fourth quarter. So there's so many different things you can look at and kind of base maybe your predictions on and how the rest of the season might work out. But like I said, Carolina's got to fix these reoccurring issues, because if they don't, they can easily lose every game the rest of the season. And I think we're also sitting here and saying, well, if they can get a little bit better in these areas, heck, there's reasons to believe they could go on a nice run to end the year. So it's such a weird kind of situation to be in, not only to this point in the season of where we're at, but also in the sixth season of Mack Brown 2.0. And again, I think that's where a lot of the frustrations and criticisms come is, why are we having to get on the podcast week in and week out and talk about the same things every week and they're not being fixed?
Yeah, a couple things to hit on there. Number one, we look at Virginia not being a massive task. Florida State the same. Wait the same, especially at home. BC a little bit because
not trending in the wrong direction right now.
State because state, and they usually get better during the season under Dorn. There's no reason that was such a big win for them the other day because it should have lost. Shame on Cal. Shame on Cal. But State got the win. So now they and Carolina both have a shame on the opponent win. Mm-hmm. Carolina had theirs with Minnesota. But those teams are all looking at North Carolina and saying, Virginia fans are looking at Carolina and saying, well, it shouldn't be a problem this weekend. Well, we should move to 5-3, be one game away from bowl eligibility, which will certainly keep Tony Elliott around for another year. Mm-hmm. So they're looking at it the same way. Florida State fans are saying, hey, Chapel Hill comes in here in a couple of weeks. It's a good chance to get a win. They're no good. I get it because they haven't proven to be very good. They were not very good against Charlotte, which we noted. It was 17-10 against Central. We saw what happened against JMU. And then when they have done things well, they find ways to lose. This team is finding ways to lose games.
Yeah.
They're learning how to lose. So credit, I don't think Max lost the team, so credit him for not losing the team. They've been there all the time, but they've had these massive other problems with Clemens, with Max, and with Ty Lee, and then they're finding ways to lose games. And that it's very difficult to stop that landslide, that rush, if you will, stop it in its tracks and then start a new direction. It's very difficult to stop all of it. My guess is they're just going to have to be better in a couple areas than they have been, and that's how they'll win games. I don't think they're going to suddenly start shutting people down. They've given us no indication that's the case. So you ask yourself, what areas can they be a little bit better? Well, Jacoby can be better. I don't think Jacoby's ceiling is super, super high, but it's higher than the way he's played. So let's say Criswell can hit a little bit more of the deep ball, maybe one or two more a game because he's missing pretty badly on a lot of them. That changes things. The offensive line has to do a little bit better job blocking because Omarion is not running the ball lately the way he should. He's getting 100 yards, but in the last 3 games, he has 70 carries. If you take away the 71-yard run against Georgia Tech last week, he's averaging less than 4 yards a carry on the other 69 runs. And to make it even uglier and more concerning, 27 of those 70 runs in the last 3 games, 1 yard or less. So it's been 1, 0. He's had 9 runs of no gain. So 1, 0 or minus 27 times. That's like 42% of the time, something like that. He's not getting anything. So, and he's not breaking tackles because 3 guys are hitting him.
Yeah.
So it's not just the offensive line. The linebacker, the tight ends aren't doing their job. They're not selling the plays well. I think with Jacoby running more, they're trying to do that, but his runs are up the gut. So you don't really have to change your defensive formation too much for that as you would to try to stop Omarion on the inside runs. So Jacoby has to be better. Mm-hmm. They don't have Bryson Nesbitt now indefinitely. And I have no clue how long he's out for. It could be a while. So if they can move the ball better, if they can cash in a little bit better and not rely on field goals and get touchdowns every once in a while, that could be enough in some of these games. Because I don't see any indicator that suggests they're not going to give up 8, 9, 10 explosive plays against Virginia. Because Virginia's got a great wide receiver, the best wide receiver they faced all year in Malachi Fields. And they got a quarterback with some confidence, can throw it a little bit, can move a little bit with his legs. That's not a great recipe for this defense. So they're going to have to find ways to overcome the defense. And I will throw one positive out there that we should, because I beat up on special teams a lot, but I should give a little props to special teams. That across the board, all special teams are lumped into one bag. PFF ranks Carolina 13th in the country.
Yeah, it's big improvement.
They have a punt return for a touchdown. They have a block punt for a touchdown. They've got one of the best field goal kickers in the country. Lucas Osada, filling in for Liam Boyd in the kickoffs, has done an outstanding job. Their coverage has been pretty good. So they've had the block punt that led to a score and a couple of really shanked punts. Otherwise, they're pretty good on special teams. They deserve some props there. So they can't break down on special teams, get a little more potency from Jacoby, a little bit better blocking up front for Amarian. And that might be, that might be enough moving forward to beat Virginia, to beat Florida State, to beat Wake, to beat BC, to beat State. I think in isolated games, they can win any of the next 5.
Yeah.
Or all of them. But then when you start talking about stringing them together, it's really hard to look at what I've seen for 7 weeks and say that team can string together wins. Now, they could, and Mack is insistent that they're going to be better at the end of this season than they were the last couple. They're going to show a lot of improvement because of the youth, and the offensive line hasn't really had great chemistry. They've been banged up, and they have Randy Clements factor. That's still going to be a factor.
Oh yeah.
So
they
got to find ways to be better than they have been in areas they've been okay. I think Jacoby's been okay, so he needs to go from okay to good. The offensive line's been okay. It has to now go to good. If those two things occur and they don't hurt themselves on special teams, that might be enough to win in Charlottesville and in Tallahassee.
Agreed. Yeah. And you're right. And even if the defense can just make some marginal improvements in certain areas, I do think there's a lot to dislike about this defense. I do think there's some nice parts too, but they have to stop the run better. They have to limit. You're not going to stop these catastrophics because that's just the theme this year. You got to limit the catastrophics though. And again, we've seen it at times this year. We've seen Caleb Koss make some, nice interceptions, had a pick 6 a couple of weeks ago. You gotta have guys making plays on that side of the ball too, which is something that I know has been a big frustration amongst fans for years. Is Carolina doesn't force enough turnovers, doesn't have enough guys going out there, and yet those are things that you're not going to completely fix the defense. It's not going to jump from where it's at now to a top 25 defense. That's not going to happen. But if you can just make some marginal improvements on that side, make some marginal improvements on the offensive side of the ball. Again, Carolina's not that far away, really, when you look at some of the teams they've lost to. And look at the rest of the schedule, too. Yeah. It doesn't line up to be that difficult. Carolina's easier games are in the back end of the season. So maybe those little things are the difference, like you said, in Carolina getting some wins. But, AJ, until we see it, this is all just speculation and optimism, I guess, from a fan perspective.
Add to the Kamen Rucker. He played 9 snaps against Pitt. He played 55 or 56 against Georgia Tech. He wasn't 100%.
No.
But he's had the open day. We talked to him yesterday, and he says he's 100%.
He says he's ready to go. Yeah.
And you add an NFL player in a playmaking position. He's not like, hey, it's a defensive tackle and a 4 technique, and if you just take care of him with 2 linemen, you can shut him out. Here's a guy you got to be aware of at all times because the way they use him. He's a playmaker over there. So that could make a difference in some sequences. Maybe if Rutgers out there, JMU scores 50 points instead of 70. You know what I mean? That's kind of silly, but it's true. Maybe if Rutgers out there, Duke, Thomas doesn't break one of those runs and Carolina is able to escape, hold them off and get a win. Maybe some other stuff doesn't happen. We don't know. But we do know that Kamen's really good, and he's consistently really good, especially when healthy. We do know what the defense looked like in Minneapolis when he was on the field, wreaking all kinds of havoc. We also know what it looked like when he wasn't on the field. So therefore, not wreaking any havoc. So that's just, if you're looking for optimism, and that's what we're offering right now.
We're trying to be optimistic.
We're offering some branches of optimism for you. And the Kamen Rucker. I was reading Basketball America Team earlier. That's what I'm thinking. Remember that guy?
Yeah.
Kamen Rucker certainly is a very, very large branch to stick back onto that defense. But I do think it's going to have to be offensively and not hurting themselves. And it's certainly something this team can do. Is the optimism high, or should the optimism for Carolina fans be high that they will? I could see why it wouldn't be. I think that this is a group that needs to earn that optimism back, and they can only do that by performing.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's exactly where this team's at. Before we move into the UVA preview, real quickly, we don't usually talk about recruiting on here, but I do think it's worth touching on for a second. It's obviously been kind of a hot topic on social media and on the boards, particularly over the last 48 hours or so. On Monday and Tuesday, essentially, Carolina did lose 2 commits that ended up flipping. One in tight end Logan Farrell. These are both 2025 guys, by the way, who flipped to Illinois, one of his in-state schools, and tight end Marshall Pritchett ended up flipping to Alabama. He's a Georgia native. But again, and even by the time this comes out, who knows? Maybe there's another one in there somewhere. I mean, just speculating there, but there are.
Think Georgia.
Yeah, there are. It's not a trend you want to see continuing. Let's put it that way with guys flipping. I mean, it's never a good thing. I will say it's not a surprise to me really for a number of different reasons, and maybe a lot of that doing maybe some stuff we do know kind of behind the scenes, but also when you look at how the team is performing this year and you look at the state of kind of where the program's at right now, things like this tend to happen. This is not a surprise, but what are your thoughts on that side of the situation? Because again, fans see it, they get concerned. They might not know the whole story of why somebody may have ended up flipping. But again, I look at it in just in terms of a base level way of looking at it. It's not necessarily a trend you want to start seeing happening. I'll just put it that way.
No, and we do cover recruiting on our site. We just on this particular show, we don't talk about it much, if at all. I'll go case by case. With Logan Farrell, he's from Illinois. He's from outside Chicago. He's from Illinois. The Illini are having a really good year. Brett Bielema, the coach there, is fantastic, and he's finally got that thing going. He was very successful at Wisconsin before. They got an element of old Wisconsin, and what they do, they use tight ends. They use a lot of tight ends. And I don't want this to sound the wrong way, but it wasn't exactly like Carolina was tugging at his pant leg as he walked out the door. In this particular case, Marshall Pritchett's a different story. Marshall Pritchett is a guy who loved Carolina. I mean, he's retweeted our stuff like crazy. He was very happy to be a future Tar Heel, but then Alabama started showing love. And if you follow Carolina football recruiting and basketball recruiting, you'll know this story. You've seen it before, where UNC basketball comes in on a kid who's high on some other schools, and the Tar Heels come in, they offer, the kid is like, well, this is North Carolina. How can I say no? And they end up landing a kid when they get into the race late. That's what Alabama's done with Marshall Pritchett. And he's enamored by that, and he should be. It's Alabama. So I don't think that North Carolina I think they were tugging at his pant leg.
Yeah.
And he's gone. Now, they're going to lose one more, and they're going to lose him to Georgia pretty soon. And that's all I can really say right now. And they're probably not going to tug too hard because it's sort of a foregone conclusion. There's nothing they can do about it right now. Now, is it indictment on the program? Kids flip all the time.
Yeah.
When Clemson lost a kid here recently, Notre Dame lost a kid. It happens, especially in the NIL world, and Carolina's not guaranteeing any recruit any money. So kids flip, kids change their commitments. It happens so often now. However, the timing isn't great. It's a bad look. I know there's speculation that it means Kendra Harrison's committing, but Kendra Harrison's 2026.
Yeah, it's a different class. Yeah.
It's a different class, and there's no guarantee about anything. If kids were worried about other kids committing, no one would commit anywhere.
That's a good point.
So it's not that. I just think that in the case of Logan Farrell, his home state team is having a great year, more comfortable there. At Carolina, they already had a commitment in their mind in Pritchett, but he's gone now too. So they do need a tight end in that class. And they're taking a small class as it is. It's down to 12 now. They weren't going to take more than 15 or 16 max. They want to open up some spots for the portal. And the class of 26 is going to be big. The plan is that's a full class. They've already got, 4 or 5 commits in that class, with Zaid Lott from Charlotte being the ringleader of that group. I wouldn't be too concerned. It's a bad look. It's one of those things that the window dressing looks bad, but then once you go through, you look around and say, it's kind of like this a lot of places. So I wouldn't look into it.
No, it's not.
But let's be fair and honest here too. it's not like other schools aren't using certain things to recruit against Carolina with right now. Max age,
Of course.
they're struggling, the apathy in the fan base. A kid shows up to a home game and he looks around and there's swaths of empty seats all over the place and the students aren't there. That's not going to help. It's everybody's fault. Fans can help out. Fans can help their programs more now than ever before.
For sure.
Show up to the games and make a day of it. Enjoy your college football and spend money on the program. But I get it with Carolina football. You and I have talked about this a million times on and off the air. It's somebody put it on board this week. It's perfect. It's the chicken or the egg thing.
Yeah.
North Carolina basketball doesn't have that to worry about. North Carolina football does. And right now they're smack dab in the middle of that gray area. It's the chicken or the egg. Which one? And I don't think anybody knows, because right now I think there's a lot of, I wouldn't say the program's in limbo, but I would say that there's a lot of people that would look at the program and say, are you sure you want to make a full commitment to that at this juncture? Because of all the uncertainty about who might be in charge in a couple of months. Or that guy stays, Mack stays, and is he really going to turn this thing around? Do you really want to spend your precious college years there if it's eventually not going to work? Those conversations are being had on the recruiting trail. Other coaches are saying that to kids. Mack knows it. Pat Suttis knows it. It's nothing new to them. So when the next flip happens, Georgia came calling.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
to a home state kid. So
can you blame them? Man? Can you really blame them when you look at the state of those both, comparing those programs there, right there. So again, it happens, and it's not like Carolina's the only school that's dealing with that. I think Georgia lost a recruit. So he flipped somewhere last
Everybody
week.
does. Everybody does.
It happens, man.
But it's just the timing's bad. And I also think that it's easy to surmise some of the reasons behind it. And I think it's fair. Yeah.
Again,
it's fair because nobody really knows what the future holds for this program right now. They still got 5 games to play this year. And I know that, I guess this could start us into this leg of the conversation, but I know that there are people in the upper rings that wouldn't mind a change. I know there are people in the upper rings that want to let this thing play out. I know there are people in the upper rings that don't give a crap. Yeah. They just don't want football to embarrass a school like Georgia does off the field. They want to have the good APR. They want to have the guys not getting in trouble. They want to have the dudes that help old days across the street kind of thing.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And if they go 6-6, then they're fine. That's football doing its job. So there's a lot of different schools of thought, a lot of different lenses that people that matter how they view the program. And I think that the safest thing is just let it play out and see what happens.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. We'll dive into the preview in a second, but we did have a subscriber question that I wanted to bring up, and I'm going to bring it up now instead of the end of the show because it fits on what we just kind of talked about and what you just talked about right there. This is from Tar Heel 0910 on TarHeelIllustrated.com. $8.33 to sign up. Go ahead and do that, and you get perks, a ton of perks, and this being a very small perk of being able to, ask us questions that we'll answer on the show. But his question comes like we just kind of discussed. You guys always talk about the mood around the Keenan Football Center, but I was wondering if you guys had any info that you could share about the mood. He calls them the money guys. I think he means the boosters and administration surrounding, obviously, the current regime at the football program right now. So I know we've talked a lot about it off camera. We did a podcast on it on camera about a month ago now, where we kind of dove into why fixing Carolina football, quote unquote, is not as easy as some people might think it is. There's a lot of complications that go into it. But, and again, we do have some really good sources on maybe what the vibe is like within the administration and whatnot. But what are your thoughts on, and can you answer that and give any information on what you believe the vibe is like kind of behind the scenes?
I can tell you that there are a lot of people that don't believe that they're getting a return on their investment. So by saying that, it's interesting. Mack doesn't get everything he asked for, like he did at Texas, but he asked for a lot. So, if someone were to seek help from you, a very wealthy, accomplished man like Jacob Turner, you would have the means to help them in some areas that someone like me wouldn't. So if they ask you for the same help they ask me for, you're more equipped to help them than I am. I'm North Carolina. So part of what North Carolina cannot do isn't the kind of thing they can just wave a wand at and boom, it's taken care of. they're a little more challenged in that area. And it goes back to the fan participation, the NIL, the millionaires kicking over some bucks. And a lot of those people look and say, hey, wait a minute. We thought this guy was going to win a national championship. He said that was the goal when he came back. And look at where they are. Well, I submit, as I have many times, this is a different job than it was in 2018, 6 years ago. It's a different job, different climate, but you can still win. And you can still win more than they have. There's no doubt about that. Mack knows that. If he didn't think that, he wouldn't be there anymore. Trust me. So there are people that believe that he hasn't delivered on the promise. There are people that believe that, or don't believe it. They say without a doubt that there hasn't been a return on the investment. Because if Mack asks for 10 things, let's say he's gotten 7 of them. Well, should be able to win more with that 7. That's what some people think. There are also some people that believe, look, it's just 7 out of 12 games. Let it play out. If they do turn it around, and let's say they win these last 4, that's not inconceivable. We already discussed that. It's no more inconceivable than them losing out essentially the last 2 years.
Yeah.
No different. Let's say they do and they're 8-4. And then let's say they go to the Pinstripe Bowl and they beat Texas Tech or whoever, and they're 9-4. What's the conversation like then? So there are people that are reasonable and say, let's let this thing play itself out and see what the deal is. Some people are like, well, if we know it's not going to be him, well, you got to make a move because you got to preserve the recruiting class. But there's not much of a class to preserve. You want to preserve Bryce Baker and a few guys because they're big time talents, but it's not a huge class. So you asked the question, I answered. There are different schools of thought, but the boosters who pay the most money want more of a return on the investment. And I will say it's interesting that not in Georgia Tech, but after Pitt, there were no boosters in the post-game press conference. A lot of them, they like to hang out in their big shots and they like to stay back there during the press conference. There were some back there after Georgia Tech, but there were none back there after Pitt.
Yeah. And that's not, again, you may be reading into it too much, but it's different than the normal. So, I mean, it is right to kind of look at it and be like,
I'm not reading into it too much because, I hate to sound like an old guy, but I've been around.
Yeah.
I've seen this stuff. I've seen almost how many coaching regimes have I covered closely, especially in the state of North Carolina. I covered state I was knee deep in Chuck Amato. Toward the end, I had that long interview with him in his office that year in 2006 when he complained about Chip Alexander and John Bunning, the great Chip Alexander from the Raleigh News and Observer, and John Bunning more than anything else. Cried about Ave Maria and his mom. I mean, that was one of my favorite 2 hours of my entire career. I've told you about all that stuff.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
I've seen the guys come and go at Duke. I saw the demise of Jim Grobe, which I never thought was possible because he did so many great things that no one had ever done.
Yeah.
So it happens. Very few football coaches leave on their own. Most of them hit a point and they can't get higher. And it starts to drop off. I think in Mack's case, if it is dropping off, it's a pretty quick drop off. There was somebody who put out a tweet the other day that said the number of days since the existing ACC teams last won a conference game. So they're not including Cal, Stanford, and SMU. It's 20 days, 7 days, 15 days. For North Carolina, it's like 348 days or something. They're 1-7 in their last 8 ACC games. They're 3-9 in their last FBS games. And mind you, one of those wins was Minnesota when they missed a field goal. His time expired. One of those wins was Charlotte, and Carolina stunk and still won. And the other one was the overtime win at home over Duke against a third-string quarterback.
Yeah, that was a Drake May special right there. Yeah.
Carolina couldn't put them away. They couldn't stop them, couldn't put them away. So the last 12 months of North Carolina football has been terrible. And I think that there are people that are judging Mack a lot more on that than the first 4.5 seasons.
Yeah, that's, again, he's in the business of winning football games. And when you're not doing that, and when you're and again, when you're having the same problems that we talk about all the time and maybe not showing the ability to fix it and things like that, there is going to be pressure, and there will always be pressure. I look at AJ being a football coach. It's like being in a relationship. There's 2 ways it ends, right? In a relationship, you either live happily, get married, live happily ever after, a beautiful life, or you break up. It's the same thing with the football coach, AJ. He either gets there and he coaches forever until he decides he wants to step away, or you get fired. it's the same kind of thing. And again, Mack's not stupid. He knows this. Roy talked about this all the time in his tenure is you're in the business of winning games. That is what you are there to do as a coach. And when you are not doing that, pressure comes, criticism comes.
I'll tell you what one booster said to me. I'll tell you what one booster said to me, gosh, week and a half ago, maybe. It was actually before the Georgia Tech game. It was that week. He said, let's say you own a dam, or you're the city and you have this big dam, and there's a leak that springs in the dam. Yeah. And then a couple other little things leak. And it happens every year in the fall. And the company that you hire to go in there and plug the leaks in the dam, they go and do it and they say, okay, done a good job. Looks good to me, even though you can see the chewing gum. Mm-hmm. And then the leaks spring again the next fall because it's something about the water rush and the water's just wants to overflow more in the fall. I guess lots of fall rain. I don't know. This is his analogy. He said, after a while, when the same leaks keep springing, you're going to find someone else to plug up those leaks.
For sure.
That's the analogy that I was given. And I don't think it's unfair because whether it's Bateman, Chiswick, or Collins, I mean, we've seen the same types of plays.
Yeah.
Bust and run plays, pass plays, crucial penalties. We've seen it all. It's the same. It's what's that saying? Wash, rinse, repeat.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. So it's the guy's responsibility at top.
Yeah, 100%. Again, I've said it a few times. It's not always the guy at the top's fault when things go wrong in certain ways. Not like, say, some guy drops a pass in the end zone that could have won the game. Like, that's not his fault. But ultimately, all these things are his responsibility to fix and get on the right track. So, and Mack knows that. I mean, he's not in it.
Mm-hmm. A guy drops a pass to the end zone that could win a game for you. Okay, that play was costly. But you're in that position where you cannot afford a mistake in that situation because things you didn't do well earlier in the game.
The margins are razor thin.
So it's not the coach's fault that a guy drops a pass, but the coach bears responsibility for the flow of the game that got you to the point where a dude had to make that play or you lose.
Yeah.
So that's the coach's responsibility. So isolated stuff happens. It's the aggregate to me that tells the true story. And the true story is when you're one of the worst teams in the college football, giving up the most chunk plays, explosive plays, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Remember, when Charlotte did it, they had 8. You and I came on and talked on I think I did the 3 things with you or Chelsea afterward. And then we did our show. We're like, okay, that's something to keep an eye on. And a lot of people are saying, well, that's the same damn thing we've seen before. So we'll let it play out. Mm-hmm. Well, we have let it play out. And they get shredded every week. Mm-hmm. I asked Jeff Collins on Monday about the 68-yard run. You could have put Jay Bateman's accent on it. Yeah. You could have put Gene Chiswick's accent on it. Said the same thing that those guys said.
Yeah.
So is it the players? They have smart kids, good academic kids. Are they not football smart? Do they not take coaching well? Are they not coaching well? What's the environment for fixing communication errors? Mm-hmm. We're hearing now guys are trying to do too much. Mm-hmm. So if you have a situation where you got 11 guys on defense, Jacob, and one guy's struggling, so that's best case, 10 of 11 are going to do what they're supposed to do. But then one guy decides he's going to try to make up for it because he doesn't have great trust in his teammate. Now it's 9 out of 11. All you need is really 10 out of 11 or 9 out of 11, and there's a busted play somewhere, big play somewhere. That's the same thing, Gene. That's the same stuff John Papuchis used to tell us when Larry Fedora was coach.
Yeah.
It's the same Mike Eckler. I mean, who when he was linebacker coach, he would talk about, well, the linebackers, they got to do the communication better. They're not making their fits because they're trying to do too much. I wonder if Ohio State's defensive coordinator is saying the same thing right now.
Probably not.
Okay, well, he's got great talent, but Carolina's got better talent than what the results have been.
Yeah.
Especially on defense.
No doubt.
We hear Jeff Collins all throughout August. Go back and listen to his interviews. Mm-hmm. Oh, Judge Evans is incredible. Kevin Hester's going to play for years in the league. He goes on and on and on about these guys. And then these dudes who he thinks are going to play at the next level are a part of the defense that's giving up a 68-yard run out the clock play for a touchdown to lose a game.
That's
why the fans are upset, man. That's why the fans are upset. That's why the boosters are upset. That's why there are buildings on campus where they're like, hey, this is just the same thing. It's never going to change.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also maybe Collins is the guy that can fix it. He's telling us Monday, when the communication is there and no one's trying to do somebody else's job and they're just trying to be one of 11 and just dominate their role, it's a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was a beautiful thing in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
Central doesn't really count, but it hadn't been a beautiful thing a whole lot since. It was a beautiful thing in the first half against Duke.
Mm-hmm.
It was a horrific thing in the second half against Duke.
Mm-hmm.
They need a lot more beautiful than excuses.
Yeah, they're going to need a lot of beautiful this weekend to beat UVA, no matter what you think about the Wahoos. But again, let's dive into the preview right here. And we'll go ahead and get out of here after that. UNC, Virginia, noon kick in Charlottesville. UVA sit at 4-3, 2-2 in ACC play. Wins over Richmond, at Wake Forest, at Coastal Carolina, and at home to BC. Losses to Maryland, Louisville, and Clemson. And AJ, offensively, I think, offensively, they're definitely better than on the defensive side of the ball, which we'll talk about here in a second, because they are struggling a bit defensively this year, but number 6 overall offense in the league. I think when you think about the offense, it's Anthony Calandria at quarterback's kind of obviously the guy it all kind of go throughs with him calling the shots this year. Over 1,600 passing yards on the season, 11 touchdowns, 4 interception. He can run as well. I think he's the third lead rusher on the team with like 200 plus yards on the ground. So a little bit of a dual threat option that Carolina's going to have to be wary of going into Charlottesville on Saturday. 2 running backs in Xavier Brown and Kobe Pace have identical yards on the season, which kind of seems hard to do with 366 yards apiece. But Malachi Fields, I think you mentioned him earlier. He's the weapon. He's the guy you got to stop for UVA. One of the best wide receivers in the ACC right now, averaging just over 86 yards a game, third leading receiver, like I just mentioned in the conference at this moment. So got to stop him, man. He's going to be the guy that they're going to be keying in on, because a lot of the offense does obviously go through what he's able to do. But AJ, on the flip side, defensively, number 16 overall defense in the league, AJ, allowing 406 yards per game. Yeah. Just to kind of compare it a little bit, Carolina is number 15 right there in front of them with 399.9, we'll call it 400 yards per game. So there's the difference. We're on here talking about how horrendous Carolina's been defensively at times this year. Virginia, a little bit worse. Maybe potentially some harder teams on the schedule that they played. I don't really care about that when you're giving up that many yards. That's just who you are at this point. So that's going to be something Carolina's going to be looking to exploit going into Saturday. Give up 30 points against Wake Forest, only 14 to BC, only 24 to Louisville, but 48 last weekend at Clemson, which is kind of what you expect when you go play down there. So again, I look at this team, AJ, and nothing really jumps out at me. I don't look at this team and say, Malachi Fields being a guy like, okay, got to key in on him, got to slow him down. A lot of the offense is kind of going to go through him. If they have any big kind of catastrophic plays from a Carolina defensive perspective, he's probably going to be the guy behind it. But besides that, especially when I look at that defense, Carolina coming off a bye week, lots of play for, a lot of motivation, at least should be going into Charlottesville. Fresh team, not banged up. And, not only that, but, Virginia coming off a tough matchup at Clemson would have put a lot into that game. I think this sets up for a really, really good opportunity for Carolina to go up to Charlottesville, get the season back on track a little bit, and see if if they can go up there and beat Charlottesville, not Charlottesville, go up to Charlottesville and beat UVA, can it be a springboard into the rest of the season? And again, I think this is a really, really good opportunity for Carolina to do so. So what are your thoughts on UVA and where they're at right now? Because again, I don't think this should be a team that Carolina should be scared of, no matter how Carolina's played this season, no matter the fact they've lost 4 in a row. Nothing really about this UVA team scares me, at least on paper.
Well, no, they won't be. And you could say they have motivation from what happened last year. I'm not a huge believer in stuff like that, because motivation going into a game doesn't ever carry over once the ball's snapped. Yeah, almost rarely never carries over. This is one of those games where Carolina, which has not done a good job forcing turnovers this year, cannot turn it over. They can't lose turnover battle. I mean, this is elementary, all right? elementary, my Watson or whatever that line was. Don't turn it over. And if you don't turn overs, then you're 0-0. Okay. You don't want to be 0-1, 0-2. You want to be 1-2, 1-3. If you can snag one or two, it's about time Elijah Huzzy gets a pick. His coverage has been fantastic, by the way. It's about time he gets a pick. If you can get one or two turnovers and figure out a way to get some kind of points out of it, and then everything else is even, you win the game. The offensive line's got to be a little bit better. Defensive line's got to be a little bit better. Can't give up the explosives. But I believe that I think Carolina's got more talent. The open date, I believe, has helped this team. They have had a situation where they, exhale. They didn't want what happened to Tylee to happen. But now that watching his slide is over with, they don't have to watch his slide anymore. There's finality to it. And I think most people understand what I'm saying here. So they can move forward. It can be the focus is football now. They're still going to honor him. Virginia's going to wear Tylee Strong stickers on their helmets.
Yes, fantastic. Yeah.
A different receiver will wear 13 this week, and they'll change each week. J.J. Jones said yesterday that it should be Kobe Paysor this week because Kobe was one of Tylee's good buddies as well. In fact, we didn't talk to Kobe last Tuesday when we had requested him because he was visiting with Tylee. Didn't want to leave, so we didn't talk to him until Tuesday this week. So I think those kind of things give him sort of a renewed purpose. I think not stressing so much over football with the 4-game losing streak because you've got reality right in front of you, being Tylee, and then his mom, and then Mack and his mom, the hug. That's reality. Yeah, that sometimes can help guys because these athletes get very stressed. Very stressed over losing. And sometimes if you're forced to step away and you have an open date to do it and you're involving yourself in this other thing and you're trying to focus and process life and you're thinking about things that are not football, suddenly when you come back to football, okay, football seems more manageable. And that's probably something Carolina fans should hope for, that the perspective gain should make football a little bit more manageable. Because I thought late in these games the last few weeks, this team played tight. They played tight in the fourth quarter at Duke. They were tight in the fourth quarter against Pitt. And was anybody surprised when Georgia Tech ran? It was somebody in the press box started laughing hard. Yeah. The 68-yard run. Did that surprise anybody?
No, and that's the problem.
So maybe I know I'm not talking much X's and O's, but I think that an even game like this, these could all be little factors that lead to a UNC win. I have not done my staff pick yet, I don't think. I'm so busy, I can't remember. I would have done it like Sunday night. But I think Carolina's going to win this game.
I do too.
I think if you have a heart and a soul, you got to hope Jacoby Criswell gets one as a starter. I'm not a rooter, but if he gets one as a starter, I'll feel really good for him because this kid's been a warrior. He is tough. He went from not thinking he was going to play at all to suddenly having this whole load on him. And I think he's done a really good job handling it. He used the open period, the open week, which by the way, they practice Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, as an opportunity to clear his mind, so to speak, and really zero in on what he has not done well, but also spend some time to look at what he's done well and how far he's come. He has come quite a ways in the last month. So I think that there might be a Criswell to Paysor, a Criswell to JJJ, a Criswell to Nate McCollum, a couple big pass plays that are going to be a big difference on Saturday.
Yeah, no, I picked Carolina to win. I think I said 31-27 in my staff picks. I'm not sure if the bye week of just not having to watch Carolina last week and how bad they've been at times is maybe giving me a reason to say, you know what, I think they go up to Charlottesville and win. But in all seriousness, it's other factors too that go into it. And a lot of it just, I think UVA is a very beatable team. I don't think it's going to be a great elite, atmosphere or, a hard place to play. I think Carolina has every opportunity to go up there and win. Noon kickoff too. We know how that can be, particularly with kind of student sections and stuff too. So I think this game sets up perfectly for North Carolina. And if they can go up there and get a win, we can finally have another conversation about something different rather than Carolina losing again, giving up 7,000 yards, not doing enough on offense. I want to have a different conversation on Saturday, AJ. I want to sit here at 4 or 5 o'clock on this computer and talk about something different than Carolina losing game. It's got nothing to do with me rooting for them to win, because that's not.
It would be nice. It would be nice
to have something different to talk about, because I'm kind of tired.
Nice just to change it up, but if they don't win and they lose in a close way, we'll throw out the question. Well, like I did with Larry back in 2018, you keep losing close games. At what point do you maybe sit back and think maybe you're not that close?
Yeah. And
Larry didn't like the question, and I wrote the column, and the rest is history. So, not that I would write that now. I'm not saying that, but
no.
I'd like to see something different, whether it's a win or not. Maybe a stout defense, and who knows? Maybe it would be nice. Returns 3 punts for a touchdown and wins that way. We have no idea. I think in a game like this, there's going to be some screwy points scored. Look at the last 3 weeks. Carolina had a pick six. They had a block punt for a touchdown last month. They had a punt return for a touchdown. They're scoring some points away from the offense, which they needed to this year, and they hadn't done really since Mack came back. Hadn't happened very often. I think there was an interception return for a touchdown against Duke in 20 or 21. And it was 21. There was an interception return in the bowl game against Temple.
Mm-hmm.
So they haven't been, and then Huzzy had a punt return for a score against Pitt last year. So they had 3, I think, in Mack's first 5 seasons, if I'm correct. And they've had 3 here in the last 5 weeks.
Yeah. No, yeah. There are reasons to be optimistic. I know it's kind of hard to find when you're a Carolina fan and you lost 4 in a row and coming off a bye week, and you didn't have to watch Carolina. I know a lot of fans might be somewhat optimistic about what can happen this weekend, but I mean, I think they go up there and win. And again, I could be completely wrong on that. Wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if Carolina goes up there and loses. And we have to have the same conversation on Saturday, but we'll see what happens when the time comes, AJ. So make sure you guys keep it locked to TarIllustrated.com. Make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell too, so you know every single time we upload. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Another edition of the UNC Football Show. Appreciate you guys watching as always. Go ahead and like the video below if you think Carolina's going to win Saturday. Let's go ahead and do that. I want to see if there's any optimism. I know me and AJ optimistic that Carolina can go up there and get a win. Let's see if the fans are optimistic as well about Carolina's chances of doing that. So
I'm not optimistic they're going to win. I think we might be feeling a little optimism. I just think they're going to win.
Yeah, so you just firmly believe it.
Yeah. I don't know if optimism is a word that I usually I have optimism here at home about things. I'm not sure I have optimism when it comes to a team I cover. And I say that because I guess optimism sometimes is a hunch. I just got something inside that says they're going to figure out a way to win this game.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if it's a springboard to anything, but sure as hell hopes the next 2 after that are the train wreck that is Florida State and the near train wreck that is Wake Forest.
Yeah, extremely winnable games. And again, I think an extremely, like we talked about, extremely winnable game this weekend in Charlottesville. But we'll see what happens, and make sure you guys come back here on Saturday afternoon / evening for 3 things, because we'll be doing that one. And AJ will obviously be there in Scott Stadium as well. We appreciate you guys watching as always. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell too. See y'all next time. Thanks.